Hello.
Good evening, Graham. Good evening, Anthony.
Hi, Charles. How are you doing?
Well, I'm a little disorganized, which I apologize.
Mm,
I've even lost your list of topics for tonight, so forgive me for that. But I feel we need to
unbelievable.
start with what never happened last week, a story you were going to tell us, and you got rudely interrupted by the sound of the end of the recording. Um, if I just say the words Martin Compston, and I'll let you fire away.
Uh, yeah, well, I think we should start instead with a 1 minute silence to the Queen. Since the funeral is tomorrow.
That'll be air silence that we can't
Right.
get back.
Okay. Okay. Just be quiet. Here we go. Little bit of respect and silence. Here we go. And that's the minute silence ended. We're now back to normal service.
Well, we are, because I'm going to come on to the Queen later on with a little sort of challenge for you, but I won't say what that is yet.
Mm.
So, yeah, Graham, as I say, you were rudely interrupted last week when you were about to tell us a story, I think possibly at your expense, about
Well, yeah.
Martin Compston.
It's always slightly my expense. Well, you and me go to them film festival every year. Have done it for about 40 years or whatever. And Martin
Exactly.
Compston was in a great film about Northern Soul one year.
He
And I'd
was.
first seen him when he was much younger in Mourns the Glen. This fantastically quaint Scottish drama. As Scottish as Tartan and The Heather. And he'd left that, obviously, eventually and started to forge a career. But this is before The Line of Duty was a massive, massive hit, which obviously made
Exactly.
him even more famous. So he's in this very good British film about Northern Soul. And he was there at the end of the film. We had to go past him, as you remember. And so I thought, well, I'll have a quick chat. So stopped to have a very quick chat with Martin. But then I couldn't resist asking him, and when are you going to do Morning Glen again?
How
And
did
you
that go
could,
down, Graham?
and you could sort of see it was a bit like a former member of the Partridge Family being asked to remember the days playing for that early '70s manufactured band. So I thought it was quite funny, obviously. But then the other days, he's not only become super famous since then, partly because of Line of Duty, but
Yeah,
I bought the big issue recently because Alex Turner of Arctic Monkeys on the front cover,
yeah,
and who was doing the interview? Probably in Paris or somewhere with Alex Turner, who very rarely does press interviews these days. But Martin
exactly.
Compston, Martin Compston. So I thought, ooh, who's had the last laugh? Not me.
So he was actually doing the interview.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they do that in Big Issue. They have like celebrities interviewing other celebrities. It's the sort of thing that,
Cutting out journalists.
well, that's always happened. I mean, remember those Enemy Christmas issues where you'd have like four famous rock stars or indie stars in a pub doing the interview with each other, including times like Nick Cave and Marquis Smith and Shane McGowan. So it's that sort of thing. They're not stealing journalists' jobs, I don't think.
Now, Graham, we're going to come on to the Queen later, but we might as well start with a British Revolution. And this is a very British Revolution, which is concerning two classic films: A Hard Day's Night, of course, the famous Beatles film, and the Ipcress file. And what they say about the way the class system changed in the UK in the 1960s, I'm going to add to that, Graham, how it differs from now.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, you could say that these two films aren't serious films; they're quite commercial films, and we should really be talking about Joseph Losey's The Servant, written by Harold Pinter. That's much
Yeah,
more serious about the British class system and how it's changing and blah blah
yes.
blah. But I always think that popular culture actually shows up what's really happening often better than the serious films do. And if you look at Hard Day's Night and Ipcress File, and both are very 60s films, and both have a lot of style, but they're both sort of like streetwise style. They're not like
Mm,
glossy Hollywood shallow style. They look like they're in the real world, which is sort of links them together. And they're both a bit working class. Harry Palmer, played by Michael Caine,
yeah.
Chris Farley is a working class hero. The Beatles, played by the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night, are definitely working class characters. So,
Cheeky
so there's a lot of
chappies.
yeah, a lot of similarities there. And I think, but the thing is, they're both irreverent films, and they're both about how the main character, Harry Palmer, or the Beatles, deals with authority. And how they deal with authority in the films is very interesting and can be judged basically by the dialogue alone, which has some quite strong similarities. So, for example, Nipcress File, which is based on the Len Dayton novel, Script was co-written by James Doran. He was actually born in Edinburgh, served with the Royal Marines in the Second World War. He went on to write a lot of episodes of Z Cars in the 60s, Dr. Finlay's Casebook in the 70s, then Juliet Bravo on TV in the 1980s. A lot of the dialogue it sums up the way the class system was going. So at one point, Major Dolby says to Harry Palmer, the new spy, the forced him to be recruited. Major Dolby says to him, "It isn't usual to read a B-107 to its subject, Palmer, but I'm going to put you straight. Insubordinate, insolent, a trickster, perhaps with criminal tendencies." And Michael Caine or Harry Palmer replies, "Yes, that's a pretty fair appraisal, sir." Then later, Colonel Ross says to Palmer, he says, "You just love the army, don't you?" And Palmer replies, "Oh yes, sir, I just love the army." And then Major Dolby says to him at one point, "Spares the jokes, Palmer. I don't have Colonel Ross's sense of humour." Palmer replies, "Yes, I will miss that, sir." So you compare it to Hard Day's Night, where they're on the train going to London, and they've got some posh chap in a bowler hat, and he's brawly, and there's four of them and one of him in their private carriage in the old-fashioned British rail system, and they want to have the window open. He doesn't want the window open. Ringo wants to play his transistor radio. He doesn't want the transistor radio playing, and he's quite a pompous man. And at one point, he says, "I fought the war for your sort," and Ringo replies, "I bet you're sorry you won."
Where did Victor Spinetti fit in?
He was like an impresario. He was the TV producer, I think. And they're doing a TV show in London, so he's the producer. But at one point, the pompous guy in the bowler hat keeps on, complaining about them. So Paul says to him, "But we're a community, majority vote, up the workers, all that stuff." And then as he keeps on being pompous and refusing to shut up, they then jump off the train and start performing for him outside his window, shouting at boys, pretending little boys, and shout, "Come over ball back, mister. Come over ball back, mister." And basically, what links the two films and the attitude of Harry Palmer and the Beatles is they both take authority. They both react to authority with no respect whatsoever.
No.
But the way they refuse to kowtow to authority and to know their place in the class system isn't to try and overthrow it like people did in Paris in 1968 or at times in the campuses of America in the 60s. It's basically they're not going to respect them. They're not going to do as they're told, but they're going to deal with it by irreverent humour and heavy sarcasm. So the British revolt against the class system is basically based on culture. And whereas in the rest of the world there was like a political revolution attempting to happen, in Britain it was much more of a social revolution and a cultural revolution with a little bit of politics in there for sure. But it wasn't. It was a much more gentle British revolution, and things did change, especially in morality and sexuality in Britain in the 60s. Everything became more liberal,
absolutely,
and progressive. And the Beatles and Michael Caine and Harry Palmer's role were part of that change, and they prepared the way for people's opinions to change on all those subjects. So the way the Beatles thought, and Michael Caine's character in the Ipcress file thought about the class system, was what ended up being what almost everybody thought, and the class system changed an awful lot as a result of that. But they weren't trying to overthrow it. They weren't saying, "You're the bosses, but we're going to be the new bosses."
Where would something like that that was the week that would fit in, and then subsequently leading up to the era of Monty Python fit into that, do you think?
That's exactly it. Since the changes in Britain were led by culture, it started with Beyond the Fringe, and that was the week that was.
Yes.
Became much bigger with the Beatles and the Stones, and some films like the Ipcress file, and then effectively ended with Monty Python, who lampooned absolutely everything, who just took everything apart, and that had a big effect on Britain. But it wasn't the same as, a revolution, a proper political revolution. There was no proper political revolution, which is why the Stones and Street Fighting Man, which they recorded and released in '68, sang "What Can a Poor Boy Do Except to Play in a Rock and Roll Band in this sleepy London town? There ain't no place for a street fighting man."
No.
because Britain didn't do that sort of revolution.
What about and then where the film If would then fit into that, which was, I would have said that was insubordinate in every way. I mean, actually, public school boys getting gunned down.
Well, in some ways, that was a very realistic film because you got to remember that communism was big until the end of the Cold War, even in the West. There was a lot of quite strong communist parties. Cambridge was full of spies from the 1930s onwards.
Exactly.
So it wasn't that far-fetched. But even Lindsay Anderson's If, which came out in 1968, which ends up with Malcolm McDowell and his small band of student revolutionaries at this posh public school on the rooftops, gunning down the head of the school, the vicar, and all the angry posh parents. Even that is still very British because although that sounds revolutionary, first of all, the film sort of hints that this is just a fantasy. And secondly, the film also heavily hints that Malcolm McDowell's violent revolution is doomed to absolute failure. And that the forces of the establishment at the school will definitely win, which isn't really a message for manning the barricades, really.
No. I mean, whereas now, I suspect that if such attitudes were being thrown around under this present government, they'd be doing their very best to try to get rid of it, which is what they're doing to some extent by the way they're treating Channel 4, for example, trying to privatize that for all the wrong reasons. Where do the voices of dissidents fit in now? Can they
it's
thrive?
pretty hard because no, well, the Marsh report on BBC Two, because BBC's been under so much pressure from the government for the last 12 years. When it had run for a few series and got a bit popular, and it was pretty hostile to the government. It's ended up on Dave Channel, so there isn't really much out there. You're not really allowed to be that sarcastic and irreverent about the people with power in Britain now. They don't like it, and unlike in the past when the cultural system as a whole basically supported what the Beatles were doing and what the Ipcress file stood for. I mean, the BBC in the 60s used to allow some right interesting progressive types to have airtime. They just don't do that anymore. You're not allowed to be that irreverent and off the wall and different unless you do it in a very knowing way, in a very calm, quite boring way.
So that the Have I Got News for You way is the one that's still accepted.
That's the one show that's left because it's so silly. They seem to get away with being exceedingly rude. I saw the special show they did to the resignation of Boris Johnson.
Oh yeah.
And the first 15 minutes was like absolutely virulent about Boris and the government. And then it went back to just being sort of panto, which is probably a good idea because if it carried on like that, I'm sure there would have been a phone call to the producer saying, like, I know you've been running for 85 years, but you finished. ...
Exactly.
But it was quite shocking. It was quite surprising to see something so straight down, completely honestly negative towards Prime Minister. Is that show?
I mean, these are times that should point to dissident comedy, which obviously is there, as we know, on the fringe, and certainly in comedy clubs, but
not so much. But I don't think.
Well, there are still political comedians out there.
Yeah, but in general, they're not. In general, comedy these days, stand-up comedy seems to be about anecdotes about yourself or your sexuality. That seems to be the two main topics.
And having young children.
Yeah. So I don't think political comedy's in the ascendancy whatsoever in stand-up.
No, I would agree with that.
It's not like the days of Alexis Sale or the
I would
Ben
agree.
Elton when he was young.
Alexis Sale makes exactly that point. Where are they? And actually, in the case of Jerry Sadowitz, they get closed down. So, show removed after.
I'm not sure Jerry's political. I mean, Jerry's just he's literally in a world of his own.
Yeah. So Graham, I thought just as a little, would I call it a quiz? But anyway, the Queen, she has featured or been played by somebody in between 100 films and TV shows.
I didn't know that.
And there was a piece by David Hare saying that there was a time when people wanted to play Hamlet. There was a time they wanted to play King Lear or whatever. But the key role suddenly became playing Queen Elizabeth II. It became a role that actors wanted to play. And obviously, we're talking women playing the role. Except I found that Eddie Izzard, did you know this? he played the Queen in The Simpsons in 2010.
Did he?
He did.
But it wasn't really Izzard because it's a cartoon, surely.
It was. I presume it was the voice that he did, and Vanessa Redgrave likewise did the voice of the Queen in the film Cars 2. And the one American actor that played him. Here's a question for you. I don't think you'll get this one.
I'm not even going to hazard the guess at that.
So this was on Saturday Night Live by Fred Armisen, and what he did, he turned her into the Queen into a bawdy, foul-mouthed person for various sketches. So that's how that went. And we obviously,
I can imagine the Queen could do that, though. I mean, obviously, I did not know the Queen, but she looked like she knew everything and she had a lot of experience in every single situation. And she'd met so many powerful people. Yeah. I think that if you'd sat down with the Queen, no matter how much you tried to shock her or surprise her or be rude, I think she would take it in stride. I'm sure the Queen could have handled any situation one-to-one.
Absolutely. I was trying to. So, do you remember Jeanette Charles when she played the Queen?
I do, yeah.
And I'd forgotten that she did it in Austin Powers, in Austin Powers in Goldmember 2002. She did it in one of the Naked Gun films, and she did it in one of the National Lampoon's films. So, which tells you quite where her standing was as a character at that time, I suppose. When instead we then went on to the age of The Crown, obviously with Claire Foy and soon to be Imelda Staunton, I think, following on this, and she's going to be the third of those. And of course, Helen Mirren Helen Mirren won an Oscar for her performance as the Queen in The Queen.
Well, that was a good film.
It was, and Olivia Colman, of course, just recently has done that. Some of the more unlikely, Neve Campbell, she played Princess Elizabeth.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah,
in a World War II parody, which was called Churchill: The Hollywood Years. She was in that.
Oh, I vaguely remember that. Yeah, that wasn't a big hit.
So there's one for the quizzes, and Amelia Fox has played the Queen. Samantha Bond has played the Queen. Diana Quick has played the Queen, and Barbara Flynn has played the Queen. So there's all sorts of difference. And then someone I've never heard of called Jane Alexander. You ever heard of her?
I have heard the name, but I don't know why. But it does ring a bell.
That was in the Hallmark Channel series. So that's pretty obscure. William and
what
Catherine,
strikes me,
Royal Romance. You know,
what strikes me about this whole list of things you give me about the Queen, how many times she's had TV and film appearances, is that they've all been quite respectful. Even the ones that are like a joke.
Yeah, or even the Jeanette Charles ones. Yeah,
the Queen is very rarely the subject of the joke. There must have been a great respect for her well before she died, because there was no films making the Queen look bad. I suppose the closest was the Queen with Helen Mirren, where she's seemed to be outflanked by Tony Blair after the death of Princess Diana. But that's about the only critical film I can remember where the Queen's.
That's true. That's true. And of course, I mean, the comic gem of the late comic gem of the Paddington scene, of course. And then one chap who did play the Queen, which is a good one for the quiz questions. Who is Gary Connery?
Is he related to Sean?
I can't answer that one. He's a stunt artist and a professional skydiver. So I reckon you might work this one out.
I'm not gonna.
2012, the James Bond scene at the opening of the Olympics.
The
Queen is seen to skydive.
Wait, stop, Charles, come on. Everybody knows that was Daniel Craig came down the parachute.
Oh, no. It was Gary Connery who came down in the parachute pretending to be the Queen.
Mine's no Queen. Oh, so wait a minute. So you actually had a man playing the Queen?
He was zipped into some kind of thing that made him look like the Queen, but he did the stunt. He was the Queen's stunt double in 2012.
Because I was going to ask if ever a Queen had played the Queen.
I mean, logically, you'd assume that someone would have spoofed the Queen in a pantomime or whatever. That has to have happened, I mean, doesn't it? Freddie Mercury never played the Queen, I don't think, did he?
No. But I'm surprised that Morrissey hasn't reappeared with the Queen is Dead album. But he's been quite as a ghost.
Give him time. He's got his tour coming up, playing in Doncaster. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. Now, Graham, I'm going to quickly look and see what topics we can still. I mean, you could do an interruption if you wish.
Well, yeah, we both saw Harrogate Theatre Rep come back fantastic style with Abigail's Party on Tuesday night.
Glorious performance.
Quite a fantastic performance and production as well.
Yeah.
It was Katie Dean as Beverly Moss. the terrible host of the world's worst drinks nibbles party. She was just absolutely phenomenal. She was nearly as good as Alison Steadman
Yeah.
in the 1977 TV version.
So she's best known in Harrogate for pantomimes, and yet here suddenly, and that's what I love about it. This is something, she's played the baddie in the pantomime. I can't remember if she's played the fairy, but she's played all sorts of roles in the pantomime. And yet, lo and behold, we suddenly see her in a completely different light in this, which is the tradition of rep after all.
Well, exactly, yeah. And the whole cast was a 5-person cast. The whole cast was superb to the point where, as I was watching it on stage at Harrogate Theatre, I forgot it was a play eventually. Eventually, I was so into it, I forgot I was just watching people on stage.
You were the 6th person at that party waiting for your cheese nibble.
I would have loved to be at that party.
And a little cigarette.
It was such a terrible party, I wanted to be there.
Graham, I think you and I have been at parties as bad as that. I really do.
Not for a while.
Not for... or not that you can remember.
Not since the 1970s.
So the season's continuing. We should just mention this, that Gaslight is coming up from this week, from Tuesday. And the third play, John Godber's Men of the World, a comedy starring actually two actors who you'll be soon seeing later in the year in the York Theatre Royal Pantomime. Robin Simpson and Paul Hawkyard are both in that play. And I think Janine Meller is the third actor in that piece.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.